Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something pretty fundamental for us field hockey coaches. Are we actually making the most of our chances inside the circle?
hmm It's a big question. We've been looking at some really insightful masterclasses from the hockey side.
Yeah, exactly. We've got Simon Blanford's analysis, which is heavy on data from the Olympics,
Ah.
looking at those in-circle outcomes.
Then there's Alyson Annan on circle behavior, movement, intent, really good tactical stuff.
And Mike McCann focusing on scoring closer in, around the 9-meter area, technical decisional aspects.
Right. And all this kind of ties into that article they did, to shoot or not to shoot. That really nails the core issue we're discussing.
It does. So our mission today isn't to say stop shooting, not at all. But it's about using this data, these expert views to, challenge ourselves. Are we maybe a bit too focused on the shot itself?
Could we be neglecting other ways to score, maybe more efficient ways?
Exactly. It's about fine-tuning for coaches working at a high level, constantly questioning, right?
Absolutely. Providing that data-backed perspective so you could look at your own training and think, could a shift here mean more goals?
So let's start with Simon Blanford's work. It really sets the scene perfectly.
Yeah, his look at that women's Olympic tournament data. What was it, around 500 shots analyzed?
Something like that. And the big takeaway for me, the headline number, is just how many of those shots are, statistically speaking, pretty unlikely to go in.
Right. The median shot value,
Yeah.
that's the average chance of scoring, was only 8%. Just 8.
And even more common, the mode was just 5%. 5% chance on the most typical shot taken at the Olympics.
Wow. That straight away makes you think, doesn't it? Are we spending hours practicing something with such a low base rate of success?
Well, yeah, and it's not just the average, it's the distribution.
What did Blanford find there?
He found that a huge chunk, like 60% of all those shots, had a 10% or less chance of scoring.
60% below 10%.
And it gets even starker. 80% of shots had a 20% or less chance.
And crucially, he said this wasn't just a one-off tournament thing, right? It seems consistent across top-level hockey.
Yeah, that's what he suggests, which implies it's something fundamental about the game at that level.
So why? Why are so many, let's call them low probability, shots being taken?
Good question. Is it the culture? The instinct? Are we as coaches maybe focusing too much on just getting the shot off rather than the quality or likely outcome of that shot?
Could be. Or maybe it's the justification we often hear.
The rebound, the penalty corner.
Exactly. The idea that even a poor shot can lead to something better. The second phase outcome.
Right. And Blanford did look at that. He tracked how often a shot actually did lead to a follow-up action.
Did he give an example?
Yeah, there was one from a Germany versus France game. A shot with only a 3% chance led to another shot, slightly better at 3.2%, which then led to a penalty corner valued at 15%.
Okay, so you add that up.
And the total probability for that whole sequence ending in a goal jumped to 20%. So, yeah, in that specific case, the initial weak shot did create a much better overall chance.
But that's one example. What did the overall data show? Is that typical?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Across all the shots in the data set, only about 20%, 1 in 5, led to any kind of second action, whether another shot or a penalty corner.
Only 20%. Okay.
And here's the kicker. When he isolated those lower value shots, the ones under 17% probability, only 13% of those led to something else.
So even less likely for the weaker shots to create a second chance.
Precisely. And maybe the most revealing stat, only 10% of those lower value shots actually managed to lift the overall probability of scoring above that 17% threshold, which Blanford used as a marker for a decent chance.
So the vast majority, nearly 90% of those sub-17% shots, they don't really improve the situation significantly.
Basically, yeah. Most are, as he put it, one and done. Minimal added value. The hope of a rebound or corner from a weak shot just doesn't materialize that often.
Okay, so if most shots are low probability, and most don't lead to better chances, what's the alternative focus inside the circle?
Well, that brings us squarely to the penalty corner, doesn't it?
Let's talk about that comparison. How many shots versus how many corners?
Blanford's data showed significantly more shots were taken in the Olympics compared to the number of penalty corners awarded. Way more shots.
Okay, no surprise there, maybe. But what about the outcomes?
This is key. Despite the huge difference in frequency, the total number of goals scored from open play shots was not significantly different from the total number of goals scored from penalty corners.
Really? So roughly the same number of goals from far fewer opportunities when it comes to corners.
Exactly. Let that sink in. Equal goals from a much smaller pool of events.
And corners have a pretty stable conversion rate at the top level, right?
Yeah, Blanford quotes the typical range for top women's hockey as being somewhere between 18% and 25%.
Okay, compare that 18-25% success rate for a corner to the 5% or 8% median for a shot.
It's a huge difference in efficiency. Way more bang for your buck, statistically speaking.
So the big question for us coaches listening is, are we undervaluing the deliberate act of winning a penalty corner?
Given these numbers, it certainly looks like a possibility. If a corner is, on average, much more likely to lead to a goal than the average shot.
Shouldn't trying to win that corner be a more central part of our attacking strategy?
Yeah.
And, crucially, our training?
And Blanford digs into this winning aspect, too. He differentiates between corners that just happen due to general pressure.
Right, the ball hits a foot in a scramble.
And those where an attacker takes a specific, deliberate action against a defender to draw the foul, intentionally winning it.
Okay, and what was the split in the Olympics data?
He found about 33%, so only a third, were classed as deliberately won. Most, 56%, came from those pressure situations. About 11% were accidental or unclear.
Only a third deliberately won.
Interesting. And how often were players trying to win one versus trying to shoot?
This is quite stark. Only about 10% of all the actions recorded inside the circle were classified as attempts to win a corner.
Only 10%, compared to shooting.
Compared to 30% being attempts to shoot. 3 times more likely to try and shoot than to try and win a corner. Wow. And his heat map showed that too, didn't it? Where these decisions happen.
It did, yeah. Visually, it's clear. Shooting dominates almost the entire circle. The attempts to win corners, they're mostly clustered out towards the sides in those areas where, perhaps unsurprisingly, the chance of scoring from a shot is already very low.
So the default thinking in prime position seems to be shoot, not draw the foul.
It certainly looks that way from the data, but here's something else when players did try to deliberately win a corner.
What was their success rate?
Pretty good, actually, around 45%. Almost half the time they tried, they got the corner.
Nearly 50-50. Okay, that's significant.
It is, and it leads to Blanford's hypothetical comparison, which I think is really thought-provoking for coaches.
Go ahead.
Okay, imagine you have 50 situations where a low-value shot is taken. Based on the individual probabilities of those shots, you might expect to score about, say, 3.5 goals in total.
Right, using those low percentages.
Now, imagine in those same 50 situations, instead of shooting, the player tries to win a penalty corner.
Okay, but they only succeed 45% of the time, right?
Correct. So you factor that in, 45% success rate in winning the corner, and then you factor in the average corner conversion rate. Let's use 18%.
So 50 attempts leads to about 22 or 23 successful corner wins, and then 18% of those convert.
You end up with around 4.2 goals.
So 4.2 goals from trying to win corners compared to 3.5 goals from just taking the low percentage shots in those same situations.
Exactly. Even accounting for the fact you won't always succeed in winning the corner, the potential goal return looks higher.
That's a powerful comparison. It really does challenge that automatic shoot-first mentality.
It absolutely does. Should we be spending more practice time specifically on the skills, the body positioning, the decision-making involved in drawing that foul in the circle?
It certainly makes a strong case for it. And this connects well with what coaches like Alyson, Annan, and McCann talk about too, doesn't it? It's not just the stats.
Definitely. Annan, in her masterclass, really emphasizes creating better opportunities. She talks about scoring passes, setting up a teammate for a high percentage shot, rather than taking a hopeful one yourself.
Yeah, she's big on reducing those speculative shots from poor angles or under pressure. Get numbers in the circle. Use intelligent movement.
Right. And she also talks about keeping the ball in the circle once it's there. Don't just pass it out and restart. Work it, create the opening, or win the corner.
It's about efficiency inside that critical zone and rewarding the right action in training, not just any shot.
And McCann reinforces this from a striker's perspective, focusing heavily on that 9-meter area.
Yeah, his analysis of the 2018 World Cup. Something like over half the field goals scored inside 9 meters.
That's right. So his principles are about being effective there. Shooting quickly, off the correct foot, using 2 touches if needed.
And being absolutely relentless on rebounds. Never giving up until the ball is dead or in the goal.
He also touches on things like post-play, knowing when to stay, when to come to the ball, that getting to goal reaction speed.
And both of them, Annan and McCann, really hammer home the importance of training intensity and mentality, making practice reflect the game.
And in rewarding good decisions, McCann instilling that never-stop attitude, it all feeds into making better choices under pressure in the circle.
So when you put Blanford's data together with Annan's tactical view and McCann's finishing focus,
It really does highlight what some call the field goal fetish, that ingrained bias towards just shooting.
Mm-hmm. We celebrate the shot, we train the shot, maybe sometimes disproportionately.
The data certainly suggests a reevaluation might be needed. We need to ask if our training balance reflects the actual routes to scoring goals effectively.
Moving beyond that simple idea that just doing more shooting drills will automatically lead to more goals.
Right. It means consciously building in practice scenarios for winning corners. Drills that focus on creating those high probability chances Annan talks about, even if the end result isn't always a shot.
And Annan's point about video analysis is crucial here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Go back and watch the tape. Don't just look at goals, look at circle entries. Where could we have won a corner instead of taking that 5% shot? Where did we miss a scoring pass?
Powerful learning opportunities there. And making that corner-winning practice competitive, like McCann and Annan suggest, to really build that desire and buy-in from the players.
It also means maybe tracking different things, not just shots on goal. What about corners won per circle entry or high probability chances created?
Yeah, metrics that give you a clearer picture of attacking effectiveness beyond just volume shooting, so you can actually allocate training time based on what's working or what needs work.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, what's the main message for coaches listening?
Well, I think the core takeaway is that the data, especially from elite levels like the Olympics, shows a huge number of shots have a really low chance of scoring.
And crucially, they don't often lead to better second chances like rebounds or corners. They're often just wasted possessions,
Yeah.
statistically speaking.
Whereas penalty corners, while less frequent, offer a much better, more consistent chance of actually producing a goal, around that 18–25% mark.
Yet, our instincts, our training habits, often seem to lean heavily towards shooting practice above almost all else.
So the challenge is, could focusing more deliberately on the skill and tactic of winning penalty corners be a more effective route to increasing our goal tally?
It seems like a really potent strategy that maybe doesn't get the training focus it deserves based on the potential payoff.
Which leads us to that final thought to leave you with. If taking a low percentage shot rarely works directly and rarely leads to something better,
And if trying to win a corner has nearly a 50% success rate in getting the corner awarded, and those corners convert at a much higher rate,
are we really maximizing our team's scoring potential by sticking to the traditional heavy emphasis on shooting drills?
what if we thought more like, say, a patient archer? Not just flinging arrows, but waiting, positioning, creating that perfect alignment for the high percentage shot. Or in our case, the high percentage play, which might be winning the corner.
Maybe it's time to explore the underappreciated art, the skill, of deliberately creating and converting those set-piece opportunities more often. Something to definitely consider in your next training plan.